Hi there, Osler. Nice to see that you have submitted another set of essays. Let's get right into this, see what you wrote. This is about fast food replacing traditional food. Let's see what you wrote, okay? Experts throughout both the developing and developed world have debated whether the fast food replaced most of traditional food, and if this replacement have had any possible consequences on society. This essay will argue that the prevalence of fast food has had generated many mainly negative consequences, using examples from the UK government and Oxford University to demonstrate points of proof arguments. Okay. For the most part, it's okay, except for grammar. There are a number of grammatical errors that we have to talk about, so let's get done with that. Starting from the beginning of the paragraph, experts throughout both the developing and developed world have debated whether fast food has replaced most traditional food, and if this replacement has had any possible consequences on society. This essay will argue that the prevalence of fast food has generated mainly negative consequences. Okay, so that's as far as grammar goes. Now, I understand that you're trying to rephrase the prompt, trying to use your own language, and you're supposed to do that, and I'm glad you're doing that. But I also think that you might have overshot this a little bit, and as a result, it's not quite conveying precisely what the prompt says. So there's nothing in your introduction about these three elements here: families, individuals, and society. So that for me would have been important. Let's see. It's mainly that, actually, okay? Because that's really at the heart of what this essay is about. So that was missing, and I would have liked to have seen that. So let's go on to your body paragraph, see what you wrote there. There we go. Wait, my mouse is not really cooperating. Okay, I think it's all right. So there is ample evidence that fast food, here you really needed a has. There is ample evidence that fast food has replaced traditional food around the world. All right, I want you to be careful because I think this is now like the third time I've seen this. Let's see, replaced, and this replacement. Yeah, so now it's the third time we're seeing some form of the word replaced. You've got to use more vocabulary, different vocabulary, novel vocabulary. So there is ample evidence that fast food, let me see if I can just come up with something off the top of my head. There's ample evidence that fast food has taken over the popularity of traditional food around the world. Right, that's one way of saying it, not the best way for sure. There is ample evidence that fast food has surpassed traditional food in terms of popularity. Okay, that would have been good. Far away from consider, I don't understand that. I don't know what this means. Far away from consider this is a positive consequence coming from industrialization or market economy. Many people, I see, maybe you mean far from considering this a positive consequence coming from industrialization or market economy, many people argue, present tense, that the predominance of fast food has had more negative than positive effects on society. Okay. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, as many specialists have been saying, the predominance of fast food could be considered get rid of as, the main cause behind the obesity epidemic in Western countries. Secondly, some experts have said that eating junk food may be bad for the environment too, because as recent empirical research by the UK government has shown, transportation, packaging, and emissions of volatile organic compounds during the preparation of junk food contributes to 30% of total garbage production in developed countries. Know the here. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that the displacement of traditional food by the increase of junk food consumption has had several negative consequences for people's health, as well as generating so much more environmental damage. All right, let me see if I understand this. So here you're talking about society, you're talking about the obesity epidemic, and then you're talking about the environment. Okay, so let's go on. Grammatical mistakes that you saw I consistently corrected, but let's move on, see what else you wrote. Careful here. It's not on the other hand, it's on the other hand. Now, when you use this expression on the other hand, you need to also have had in this paragraph on the one hand. So they go together. On the one hand here and then on the other hand here. You cannot use one without the other. Okay? So this is an incorrect cohesive device here. So you should have replaced it with something else. And there are a ton you can use. So you could say, for example, you know what? Honestly, nothing. You started your sentence out with although, and that would have been okay. Or you could say in contrast, or you could have said that having been said, or that said, or having said that. I mean, one of these would be more than appropriate. So, that being said, although there is a case for tastiness, practicality, and even availability of fast food for most people in both developed and developing countries as well, the negative cultural impact of the displacement of traditional cuisine, this is spelled wrong, you wrote cousin, cannot be overstated, not oversight, okay, wrong word. So this is a wrong word and this is a wrong word here. This is largely because food preparation is one of the primary manifestations of cultural heritage in most countries. That's nice. For example, recent research from the French government shows that the French cuisine was considered as one of the most relevant cultural manifestations of this country. Consistent with this line of thinking, local governments in many countries tried to protect traditional food, imposing additional taxes to food imports. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that some countries even consider it a priority to protect cultural manifestations, particularly traditional cuisine. All right, I liked this whole thing about cultural manifestation when I first saw it, but then you kept using it, and every time you do that, it loses its effectiveness, okay? So just because you use a nice expression, a good expression, it doesn't mean you should overuse it, because then it no longer is impressive. It's just like, okay, well, you know, there was this one piece of vocabulary, it was very good, but then it got overused. Okay, so you want to avoid that for sure. Okay, so let's see here. Let me read your conclusion and we'll talk about it in a minute. In conclusion, the prevalence of fast or junk food is a negative consequence of industrialization and has displaced traditional food, mainly because it is available for many people who stay busy most of the day working. Some people believe that the prevalence of fast food around the world has, here, had a positive impact on individuals, families, and therefore society. However, from the arguments and examples given, I personally strongly disagree. No I here with the statement. Okay. So, let's see. All right, so your perspective was clear throughout. That's fine. You mentioned it here. You mentioned it again very strongly in your conclusion. So as far as that's concerned, you're fine. I have a couple of problems with the development of this essay. Now, obviously, we talked, first of all, let's talk about the good things and the bad things. The good things is that your position was clear. The good things are that you really developed. In fact, some people would actually say, you know, maybe you should develop a little less. This is really rather long. It was like 450 words, 60, somewhere around there. Oh, okay, 438. So it was really quite long. You definitely developed your essay. I am curious if this took you 40 minutes. So I'd like you to tell me how much time you spent on this, because you do want to stay within that 40 minutes. So like I said, it is a good thing that you developed your arguments a lot. It is a good thing that you included your position, and that position was clear throughout the essay. So now I want to talk to you about some of the negative things. Obviously, one of the things was grammar. You saw that I consistently had to correct things. There were a couple of places where there was some incoherence, okay, and those are some areas that you absolutely want to be careful about. There's another thing, well, not just one thing, but there are several other things that I want to talk to you about. Who does this negative trend have an effect on? According to the essay, families, individuals, and society. And I was looking throughout your essay for you to really develop that, but I didn't really see it. Here you talked about obesity and you said that it has an effect on society. And then you talked about environment. So then I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely about society. This is about the world at large. Somebody could even potentially argue that this whole thing about the environment was irrelevant because we're asking you about people here. Okay, so we're talking about people, we're talking about families, individuals, society. So what is the relevance to the environment? Like I'm saying, you could like make a stretch and say that potentially that, you know, this whole thing about the environment is related to society. It is a stretch, okay? Um, they didn't really ask you about the environment. They asked you about those three sets of people, okay? So here you talked about society. Here you talked about something that, like I said, could be argued one way or another that it was irrelevant or that, oh, no, you know, it's okay, it's fine, okay? But um, again, where is there anything about individuals and society and families? There was nothing, okay? And so that's going to really cost you in terms of task achievement. You just developed something totally different. Um, like here, you started talking about how important traditional cuisine is to the culture, um, and I'm not really convinced that this was particularly relevant here. Okay. So again, even if it is, you could say, all right, well, great, that's about society, that's about the culture on the whole. Um, so you never really swayed from that. And you, like I said, you never talked about families, you never talked about individuals. So let's talk about one way you could have potentially developed this. Well, assuming that you said that you definitely agree with this, you could have said that you know, this is why it is negative for families. Well, it's negative for families because families no longer spend time cooking together. This is a time for families to bond, but now with the fast food all over the place, you know, people are eating meals on the run and they're not getting together to eat with the family. They're not spending time preparing food, and so this really has a strong effect on, you know, not only family bonds, but also cultural traditions that are carried from one generation to the other, certain recipes, certain traditions, certain customs. Okay. So it has, this trend has a negative impact on families. Okay. Then, in the next paragraph, you could have talked about individuals and society. So then you could have mentioned this thing about obesity. I would have absolutely been okay with that. But if you had talked about it both on an individual level and also what this epidemic means for the society, okay, if you have a society where obesity is an epidemic, as you called it, this has, you know, a major effect on the health system, first of all, right? And then you've got the society full of overweight people, obese people who are, you know, perhaps sickly, you know, who just have health issues. And so that's not going to really help the society in many, many ways. So that was another way you could have developed that next paragraph. Okay. Um, so that for me was what was missing. I didn't really think that all of this was relevant, or that you basically that you framed it the way you should have. But again, you know, for your next attempt, it's a good attempt. I know you're trying, and that's clear, and you're using the template, so all of that's good. Um, okay, let's take a look. I'm looking for your task one. Okay, so let's look now at this task one. I actually don't believe that this was one of the ones that was given to you on the course. It's really recommended that you only write on the ones that are part of the course, okay? But since I want you to, you know, progress and I want you to proceed with the course, I will correct it. But in the future, please only do the ones that are assigned to you, okay? So let's take a look. This is foreign investment in Australia. The bar chart shows, get rid of the bar chart shows foreign direct investment realized by several economies in Australia from 2011 to 2014. In 2011, almost all the countries showed a similar amount of investment, reaching values between 80 and 1,000 million. 80. Okay. The exception was Somalia at the bottom of the chart. Okay. The following year, Germany and Somalia soared their value and almost doubled it, reaching 180,000 and 50,000 respectively. Other countries slightly increased their investments. Okay. I want to talk about this so far. Let's see. I didn't like this expression, soared their values, because you don't soar something, something soars. So what you could have said here was the following year, the values of Germany and Somalia soared. That would have been okay. And almost doubled, reaching 180,000 and 50,000 respectively. The other countries slightly increased their investments. That's fine. That's pretty accurate. So I'm actually pretty okay with that. Let's see. The period from 2013 and 2014 witnessed a slight increment, no, a slight increase, not increment, a slight increase for most countries except for New Zealand and Somalia. In the first case, New Zealand rose twice from 2012 to 2013. What does that mean it rose twice? Do you mean that it doubled? Let's see. New Zealand is orange. So it went from here to here. No, so you don't mean that it rose twice. That's the wrong word. You can say that it increased twofold. You can say that it doubled, but you wouldn't want to say it rose twice. Okay? Whereas Somalia, once again, not duplicated, doubled its investments that same year. Nevertheless, after reaching a peak of almost 90,000 million, Somalia felt, to just over the 20,000 mark. Here, you want to use that word there, mark, the next year. All right, so let me see what you're telling me about Somalia. Somalia, what color is blue? All right, okay, fine. Overall, the bar chart shows that most of the selected countries increased their direct investment in Australia from 2011 to 2013, except for Somalia, which grew the first 3 years and then plunged in 2014 and returned to the same level shown in 2011. Okay. So, there's a lot about this that I like, but there are some major problems with it. Basically, I mean, okay, great. You had a couple of grammatical errors. There were some areas of awkwardness. We talked about them. We discussed them. You know what they are. So that's fine. Here's the thing that for me is a huge deal. If you look at the band descriptors, you'll see that it says that they say something under task achievement about key features. What are the key features? The key features are the categories. So, okay, obviously one key feature is the years here on the bottom. So you have to talk about each of them. All right. Otherwise it's, you're missing a key feature. And then the other key feature are the categories here. So, there were 6 countries mentioned, and from what I could see, you really only talked about 3 of them, primarily Somalia, which was really strange, because it's actually, like the lowest figure, but the whole thing, it just like consistently talked about Somalia. So this is not a good selection of data. Okay. You should have at least mentioned each of the countries by name at least once, just so that we know what they are. Because you have to remember that you have to approach this task as if you are describing it to someone who does not have it in front of him or her. Okay. And so your role is to really pick out the key features, the things that are really important, so that the person listening to your description or hearing about your description or reading your description can envision the information you have in front of you. Okay. Now that's the ideal. Okay. So like So there are a couple of different ways to do this. One way to do this is really just honestly listing the countries here. So let me show you what I mean. The bar chart shows the foreign direct investment realized by several economies, and then you name them, you put them in parentheses, and you name them. That is one way to make sure that you have not missed any single category, okay? And that's a really easy way. But the other way would have been to have a far more integrated answer here. Like for me, for example, I think it's really important to talk about which countries had the highest figure in each year. You never talked to us about Malaysia, okay, which was the highest country, which was the country with the highest investments in 2011. But then it was totally surpassed by New Zealand, or no, it wasn't. Sorry, Germany, who you mentioned. That's fine. But then you had New Zealand the next year. And then in the following year, you had these two countries again. And those are the only countries you mentioned, those three. But again, you should have mentioned Malaysia. And you should have at least mentioned the other ones, at least by name, even if you didn't go into a lot of detail about them. Let's see. So I'm actually going to show you a really easy way to make sure that you have covered all the countries, okay? By telling you what I would write for 2011. So I would start like this. I would say that in 2011, investments from each country did not exceed over 100,000. What is it? 100,000 million? Okay. I would say that Malaysia was the country with the greatest investment in Australia at 100,000. The least investment was by Somalia at approximately 20,000 million. And the remaining countries, and I would name them here, I would say New Zealand, Mexico, Germany, and Thailand, were all between, I don't know, it looks like around 75 and 90,000 million. Okay? And then I would change that. I would say in the following years, in the following year, the figures changed rather dramatically. Germany doubled, making it the country with the most investment. You do want to mention that, okay? Because it's not enough just to talk about Germany, but you have to also tell us why you're talking about Germany. So it's the company with the highest investment at whatever that number is, 180,000. Somalia continued to be the country with the least investment, although it too doubled to 50,000, and the other countries remained relatively similar. You did say something like that, but what I want you to do here is I want you to signpost some of this. What do I mean? I mean what I just said about Germany, that it was the highest figure. That's why you're talking about it. Okay? And that's something important to do. So, I mean, what I'm suggesting, at least for these two, is not very dissimilar from what you did, but you notice that I did mention all of the countries and I did just signpost it a little more effectively. Okay, so go ahead, give that a shot, and let's see more work from you. I'll be waiting, okay? So I'm looking forward to it. Good luck. And I think it might be in another file, so let me go find that now.